Hey everyone, welcome to the Peak Season Podcast. This is Tyler, one of your hosts for today, and I have with me Luke, of course. Luke, how's everything going?
Good morning, Tyler. Everything is going great. How about yourself?
Doing good. So today we have a little bit of a different topic, of course. One of our clients was asking us about whether or not they should have gaps in summer. As many of you guys know, maybe depending on your area, whether that's maybe south and winter's your high demand, or you're like us and you're up north and summer's your high demand, should you allow smaller stays for the night?
Right. So I think a lot of people, especially in traditional old school beach markets, are doing a 7 night Saturday to Saturday booking through their peak season. That's what you're going to find in a lot of the coastal Carolinas. A lot of the properties up in northern Michigan where we're at, especially on the water, are doing that 7 night minimum stay. And I think it's a legitimate debate whether that's and it's different for everybody, whether that is going to be good for your business or not. So we're going to break this into a few different sections. First, revenue. Is it better for revenue? Second, is it better from a workload perspective? And then third, just X factor, random spitballing about what we think about it, how it's going to impact your listing, downstream impacts, just whatever comes to mind. So
And even lessons learned, Luke, because we have a great example of one, which was my old listing, Seven Pine Chalet, which Luke purchased, and I had it set that way, and he went the other way. And so we'll talk about that and how he saw the impact, and my retrospect, hindsight 2020, what I would have done differently.
sure. So Tyler, why don't you go into what you specifically do at White Birch Cabin? What season are you on a 7 night min? Do you restrict check-in, check-out? Sort of just go into what that looks like, and then we'll talk about the revenue that you get.
So I do require a 7 night minimum. Again, White Birch Cabins, waterfront, Lake Michigan waterfront log cabin. We do require Saturday to a Saturday. So Saturday check-in, Saturday check-out. And our check-ins 4 p.m., check-outs by 10 a.m. And that just gives our cleaning crew enough time to get through, especially when we have in the summer, we do get pretty much max guest occupancy. I'd say, our max occupancy is 8 adults or 10 if you have kids. And it's pretty much consistent with that because it's multiple families or friends, group of friends coming, to enjoy a week in the summer. Our bookings start on that 7 night minimum, typically that second week of June through the very last day of August. So this year, as an example, August 31st falls on a Saturday. So I'm requiring a 7 night min August 31st. So somebody's got to stay the 31st through whatever that is, the 5th or whatever.
So does that include Labor Day
September.
weekend?
Yeah.
It's not
Yep.
It is? Okay.
Yeah. And the reason I chose to keep that, even though you're like, kids are typically back in school, right? Before Labor Day or the day after Labor Day, at least in Michigan, they are. I historically, for the last 2 years, I've booked it for the full week, even the first full week of September. So that's why I'm choosing to do it now. Maybe I change that and maybe I lax it a little bit as we get closer. But at this point, I'm keeping that 7 night min. And why do I choose that second week of June? Well, again, about 75 to 85% of my bookings are Michiganders that are coming up north. And I know because I lived in Michigan that schools end that second week of June. So that's typically when I start, requiring that 7 night min because that's when people are starting to come and head up to enjoy their summer or begin their summer.
Okay, cool. So so we're getting into the revenue portion of this a little bit. So do you think that maximizes your revenue?
Man, it's hard to say on this specific property because I only know what I know and what I've done, right?
Right.
Do I think I could do shorter bookings, let's say maybe a 3 or 4 night and go from a 1,500 ADR to 1,800, 1,900? Maybe. But man, I don't know. It's hard because I'm already at that upper echelon and that 90th percentile plus on my ADR. So I'm just not sure. If the house had the capacity to fit 20 plus people, I think it would be different for me. I really do. I think if I had a bigger property and let's say it was still waterfront, I probably would do lesser days and, just skyrocket that AD. Because I think at that point you can, because now you're bringing in, multiple families, 3, 4, 5 different families coming in. My property is just not that big enough. I don't think that I'm I think maybe I saw like 3 families come together, but it's again like 2 per family or something like that, not 5 families of 4+ people or something of that nature. So, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe we test it out one time. We'll see. Maybe August I'll try it out if it's still not booked. But I think right now for me it's more just easier to manage. And I'm getting the bookings at the revenue that I'm wanting. So for me, I'm happy with it. It's not about trying to see how much I can get. It's about, am I satisfied, and is it still going to meet my goal, which you talked about in an episode recently. And so I have my annual goal. I know where I need to be and what those prices are. And as of right now, I'm meeting those or exceeding those. So I don't feel like I need to push the lever a little bit.
Sure. So what I'm doing right down the street is I start my summer on a 5 night minimum,
Mm-hmm.
and I let those book out, and I don't restrict check-ins or check-outs unless it's like I don't let somebody like check out on the 4th of July and break up that weekend or stuff like that. But I don't have a day of the week that's only reserved for checkout or check-in or anything like that. And what I'm doing is I'm going way, way, way above market for like Friday and Saturday and a little bit on Thursday, and then kind of going down closer to the market or maybe even slightly below on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But
Mm-hmm.
the average is a higher ADR all the way across the spectrum. So I think going into guest psychology, just kind of what I understand it to be is people are okay spending money for a nice vacation rental. The dollar amount, and a lot of times it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
But one thing that they will never ever do is say, I only want this place for 3 nights, but I'm going to book it for 5.
Wait. Yeah.
So I mean, that's just not something I would ever do. Like, I don't, if I need to go to the Smoky Mountains for 6 nights for Thanksgiving, like I do a lot of times, I don't set a 7 night filter and think, well, I'll just leave early, even if it might be less. Like I might
Right.
spend less total money to book the place for 7 nights and get a 20% discount because they got a, that's what their discount's set at and everything.
Yeah.
But people just don't do that, right? They just don't want to pay for the extra amount. So maybe I should be searching that way. I mean, guarantee myself a late checkout or whatever, right? But it's just not how we think.
Yeah,
So
you're,
I
you're
try
right.
and use the carrot instead of the stick to get those longer bookings. So if somebody is actually searching for 7 nights, then hopefully I will rank higher and I'll be more appealing because they're seeing a lower ADR because like Monday and Tuesday is actually marked down.
Yeah.
And then conversely, if somebody doesn't care and they just want they want to have a place in northern Michigan for a 3-day weekend in the summer, well, at a
Mm-hmm.
certain point with my property, I'll get down to that, and they will be able to get it probably if it's not all booked up. But I'll go down to a 2 or 3 night min after I start to fill in some of those 5 nights, and it'll be at a super high rate. So if somebody does break up my week and they actually book Monday through Thursday, I'll let a Friday, Saturday sit out there, but the price is going up.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
I think I've never A/B tested it, but I think I get more revenue operating that way. That being said, it is more work.
yeah, but let's talk about also the perk or the benefit of doing it the way you're doing it versus mine. So let's say that I want to check in. I'm somebody on Airbnb and I want to start on Friday, or I don't know. I'm just searching, right? I'm just
Hmm.
searching. I'm not necessarily going to commit today, but I'm just out there searching for some places so I can show my family or my friends. Again, I think, Luke, to your Seven Pines, still a lot of families come, right? Or groups.
Yep.
It's not just typically 1 or 2 people that are going to spend, 6, 7 grand for a week. I mean, it can happen, but it's very few and far between. But if I'm
Hmm.
looking on a Friday to a Tuesday, my listing's not going to come up, or at least not even remotely on the top search. Like there's on the lower end of Airbnb, it says like similar listings with different dates, right? But it's
Right.
not going to show even as an availability where your property is. And I think that
Yep.
that's another big part of that you do. If you are contemplating what you're wanting to do, I think you do need to factor that in and think about that, right? And I think one way to do that that's great is, what we call the enemy method. Look at your competition. Who's by you, who's nearby. Are you a similar property? And I know Luke and I are down the road, but I think we are a little bit different of properties. And I think that's why we kind of have different, I don't want to say opinions, but just different strategies and what we're doing. But I think you should still be looking at your competition all the time. And especially if you haven't already, you should have your strategy for summer already,
Yeah.
because I mean, people are already booking,
So before we
especially.
get too far down a tangent here, let's look at just to wrap up the revenue. I think big picture, you can highlight your month on Price Labs and say, this is what I'm going to get for this month, assuming I can book all 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, okay, I want to make X. This is what my nightly rates are set at. This is I'm going to make it, assuming it gets booked. Whereas for me, I have to actively manage it in order to maybe make more than I could have ever even imagined. But I have to be very involved in that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think with active management, there's the potential to make more money by going with a lower nightly mint. But there's
Yeah.
also it could also blow up in your face if you get distracted. So I think that's where we need to. If you're in one of those markets, do you want to try and are you going to be in Price Labs 3 or 4 times a week managing your summer pricing? If not, maybe the longer nightly mint is good for you.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, you have to be active. You got to be looking at your prices weekly, at least now already for probably summer. I'm sure you are, Luke, if not multiple times already, in playing with that a little bit to see what may trigger. And I think that also goes, I mean, this is a whole nother podcast that we should probably do is, I started really getting into the data of when people are booking. So I know that I actually have 60% of my bookings are on Mondays. I
That's
think
cool.
that's interesting. I never knew that until last year and I started following it. And then, so I started like changing my prices on Sundays and seeing what, even if it was plus or minus a few bucks, I would change them just to see if it would, continue that way. And it does seem to still be true for my property here. So it's interesting. But all right. So next topic is our next point was what are we talking about, Luke?
The logistics, right?
Logistics.
Just
Yes.
logistics of how the 7 night min works,
Yeah.
pluses and minuses of that.
Yeah. So I'll start with white birch. So logistically, it's great. Why? Because I'm probably more readily available on a Saturday as the host, not working during the week. So it's just a little bit easier for me. For the cleaning crew, typically it's easier for them as well, at least from what I've seen of our cleaning crew, because we have like somebody, well, the way it has been working, and we may have a little bit of changing with our cleaners, but my one cleaner was more available during the weekdays and the other one was more available on the weekends. So it just worked out really well for them. I would say the downfall is sometimes it's hard to get somebody out on a Saturday during the weekday, like a handyman or something of that nature, because maybe they're out enjoying their summer with their family as well. So I could see that as a downfall, for a weekend check in, check out. But, so far, knock on wood, it's been very easy to manage the summers on a weekend check in, check out.
Yeah, I
What
think the
about you?
predictability of that is great. I think having the cleaners be able to predict just, hey, all summer long, we're going to clean white birch every Saturday. That's cool.
Yeah, it's super, super easy for them.
But that being said, if we were using the same clean team, which a lot of times we are, if I was doing Saturday to Saturday also, that might be a problem because now they have 2 cleans on that day, whereas I probably have a clean on a Saturday in the summer like once because most people don't split up the weekend if they don't have to.
Yeah.
So I think that could be an issue. And then also there's just kind of the X factor of you have these guests that paid a super premium for 7 days. I would imagine almost all of them want to stay late and because it's Saturday, and almost all of them want to check in early. And you have somebody that's
Mhm.
been there for 7 days, so there's more wear and tear on the property. There's more, I shouldn't say wear and tear, but it's been lived in for 7 straight days. It's not like a 3 night booking. They
Right.
unpacked, they cooked, they did all the things. So it is more of a clean probably than some of my 3 nights bookings would be during the summer. So
Yeah,
it's
I
almost
think
probably impossible to get early or late check in / out.
so. Interestingly enough, Luke, one of the things that I think you and I had a text about this, but I've had actually more guests recently over the winter asking for an early check in or a late checkout. But in the summer, and I think this goes back to comms and, what you're giving your guests and the timeliness of giving them information. Like I set that tone pretty early for summer guests that I can't accommodate early check in or a late checkout. Now, has there been, even in the summer, some times where we did have like the most extraordinary guests that probably pre-cleaned and the turnover was, or maybe they didn't use 2 of the beds and the turnover was more like 3 hours versus 5? Yeah, it happens. But
Yeah,
then what I do is I reach out to the guests and I'm like, hey, guess what? Great news. We got through cleaning early. You're welcome to come to the property. I've already, before I even text them that or message them that, I've already updated their code. But now whether they get there or not early, it just depends on where they're at. But I can tell you that people are super ecstatic when they get that text, or if they get that text and it's a possibility.
So one other thing, the last thing I think about cleaners would be, I like to be my cleaners' top priority, and I know you do too.
Yeah.
But I'm making them a lot more money in the summers with 8 cleans a month or 9 cleans a month, and I do know that that makes a difference sometimes, where they know who is writing the bigger check that month or who's giving them more cleans, and they appreciate it. Just like the properties that shut down for the winter versus operate all winter like ours, we're always going to be priority because we're helping them support their family all year long. So
Yeah.
that's another
No,
thing to kind of factor in.
very valid point there. Luke and I definitely believe in hiring local and people nearby, and that's a good point because these individuals this is what they rely on, and or they have a second job too because they need that income, and so I totally can respect that. Now I'll play devil's advocate on the same end. I think there's, yes, the more money is great, but if you have a second job, sometimes it's a lot. So it just depends. I think everybody's different. I think what works for Luke and I is because we have a little bit of differences. I think for our cleaning teams, we have a great lead there, Tammy. She makes it work regardless. So I think for us, it's just I don't know. It just works out really well right now. So I'm not changing anything right now, Luke. I'm going to stick with my 7 days. One thing I always thought about teetering with, you did bring it up, was whether Saturday was the best day or a Sunday would be better or a Friday would be better. I don't know. What I do know is why I chose that 7 day was based off of my competitors at the time when I went live with this were Saturday to Saturday. So I just kind of stuck with that because I felt like, okay, these properties have been going for 5+ years and they've done really well. So I'm not going to change or reinvent the wheel here. I'm just going to do what the status quo is.
So let's get into the X factor.
Yep.
I think the biggest thing for me is, especially when you're starting a new listing, I think the 7 day thing is no bueno. Or if you're trying to overcome being buried in search results or rankings, or you're trying to get a listing healthy, we want as many reviews as we can, and we want as much momentum as we can. So if I have a choice between getting 8 or 9 reviews in July versus 4 reviews in July, I'm absolutely going to choose 8 or 9 reviews because that's going to help you book a better August.
Yeah, and let me preface, Luke, just for our listeners, when I went live in August of 2024, I did not have a 7-night min. I did not do that. Now, I did get a decent amount of 7-night bookings, but I did not do a 7-night min because, to Luke's point, as a new listing, it is about getting as many people into your place and getting them to give you reviews, 5-star reviews, as quickly as possible. That is your way to earning, guest favorite badge, to earning super host status, all of these things. And I know we're going to have a session about what those mean and how to achieve those. But, in order to be in those top rankings and to continue, you get that little push because you have to offer that promo for the first 3 bookings. But then after that, you're really on your own, and it's really up to you and your decisions and strategy to maintain your property being at the top of that list.
100%. And even if I got the same, say, revenue for a 7-day period, but I booked out the weekend at a high rate, the weekdays at a low rate, but I got 2 reviews out of it, that is more valuable to me. That has more value. So,
absolutely.
100%. And I still preach that even now that I've been operating for a year and I've got like 75 reviews on this property. I'm still all about the momentum. Because summer ends very abruptly and those nice big payouts we're used to getting go away.
Yeah, they do.
And I like to have momentum going into the shoulder season.
Yeah, great point. Let's talk about Seven Pines as kind of our example. So when I had Seven Pines, I was doing the full week. Again, I didn't really change the status quo. That's what the prior owner was doing, who had it as a short-term rental. Based off of my goals, I was meeting my goals definitely through the first summer. I would say the second summer, though, is when I should have probably thought about switching that focus. And it was only because I don't know, I just wasn't thinking about that, Luke, at the time. And I was still a newer owner. So it wasn't like, maybe I should lessen these. It was just like, maybe I'll just lessen the price. And so I would have some weeks where I was getting the full week and I was making, 45 or $5,000, which was good, great for that place. But I can guarantee you've made more than that in a week doing less nights and not even filling up the full week, right? To your points on the multiple things we talked about, um, high insight. Should I have done that second year at Seven Pines, and could I have increased my revenue more than the prior year? Because honestly, my second year was pretty stagnant. It wasn't any higher, it wasn't lower, but it wasn't any higher. I think that I could have definitely increased my revenue, and obviously my occupancy if I had thought differently, and maybe listen to more podcasts like this where you're learning from others and what they've done and the lessons learned.
Yeah, and I came across it because I was using a professional revenue manager at one point, and I was watching the moves that they were making and taking trainings that they offered.
Hmm.
And shout out to Jake Cohen, he's fantastic, and I've since learned a lot from Emil Sakel, and those guys really know what they're talking about. And I would, if I did not want to be a revenue management nerd, or if I was just getting tired of it, I would 150% hire a professional revenue manager to come in and just run your price labs, take it off your plate, let them
Hmm.
actually analyze what's what, and they will pay for themselves over and over and over again for sure.
Yeah.
But
No.
like you and I both really like getting into the numbers,
Yeah.
and with our portfolios of this size and things, we can get into that, and we can be in our price labs 3 or 4 days a week.
Yeah,
If,
it's
if that's not
manageable.
you, there's one bookkeeping goes first. The next thing that goes is revenue management.
Yeah, I can't preface that enough. I think if you are not somebody who is going to actively, and it's not even just pricing, Luke, like if you're not even actively getting into your Airbnb and switching things up, changing photos, making sure you're like managing that aspect, you need to start thinking about, what options or what services may be best suited for you, like a co-hosting service like Upstream Vacations, right? Because those are the things that we have to do to keep our clients in those top listings and to get them booked. And it just takes some time, and it's not, I don't think it's hard work necessarily, but it does take some thought, and it does take some strategy, and it does take some time to be able to do that consistently. That's the key. The key word is consistency. You have to be consistent in what you're doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to take the emotion out of your pricing is a hard thing to do as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm managing a property, or not, I'm not managing the property, I'm managing the revenue in Highlands, North Carolina right now. And it's a 6 bedroom, 5 bath, and one of the 6 bedrooms and one of the bathrooms is a guest house. So we have 3 listings. We have the 6.5, we have the 5.4, and then we have the 1.1. And the 1.1 books nonstop all the time. So we have that set out to where it's on a 30 night, so the calendar is only open under 30 nights in advance. So if the 6.5 doesn't book, it's probably not going to book inside of 30 days, being that
Right.
big of a property. So at that point, the calendar opens for the 1.1. What I'm finding, what the way I set the revenue is, a lot of the comps in that market were on a very large nightly min for the entire summer.
Hmm.
So you're looking at a 7 nights or a 5 night or whatever, and I took it down to a 3 or a 4, but I cranked the rates up really high for the 6 bed. And then knowing that if that doesn't book, I have the 5 bedroom and the 1 bedroom that I can fall back on, and they can be booked separately. There's enough space there to where I can have one party in the 5 bedroom, one party in the 1 bedroom. So I know that if say we get super high ultra premium rates for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I can book out the cottage at decent rates for
Hmm.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday,
Yeah.
and maybe I can still book out the 5 bedroom at medium rates the rest of the time. But it's hard to look at your 6 bedroom listing and say, well, why are we not booking 7 nights a week like all the competition? It's like, well, even if you book for 3, you're going to get more money than if you had booked for 5. And then
Yeah.
we have these other layers that we can fall back on to continue making money on those other days to supplement that. But you have to have the patience to look past the first layer of the onion and say, okay, holistically, we are going to make more money doing this. And I think you can make a solid argument that if I have the choice between, would you rather have a bad guest for a week or a bad guest for 3 nights?
Yeah. That's a good
So
point.
100 guests is a total nightmare. We love our guests, but sometimes they're nightmares.
So you had me thinking, because you're kind of like the wise Buddha for me. Um, let's see what happens with this inquiry we got for. So I had a cancellation for July. right? And one of my direct booking guests, though, wanted that weekend. So I was able to move her up to that weekend that got canceled. So I still have July 25th through August 1st open. Why don't we do this? Why don't we see what happens? If this guest doesn't book in 24 hours, what we should do, Luke, is try it out and see what happens for that. We'll look at my pricing. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if any action happens quick or not. And I know it's only 1 week, but I'm willing to try it. I think it'd be interesting, and it's 1 week. So, but it would be interesting to see if it books, because that weekend's been open now. It'll be going on 2 weeks on Sunday, so it's worth a try.
Yeah, what Emil always preaches, Emil Sakella, Pricing by Mira, check him out.
Yeah.
But is if things are stagnant for you, or if things aren't going like you want, just go down to a low nightly minimum. Go down to a 2 or a 1 night minimum, and it will almost always shock the algorithm. And very, very, very rarely will you actually ever get a 1 night booking. But for whatever reason, you're going to pop up in more search results. Airbnb is going to favor you a little bit better because you are removing restrictions on the guest. It just works.
High level, everybody has their own choices and their own decisions. You as the owner or the host can make that decision. I think the smart thing to do, though, is what I took away a little bit from the conversation today was just I do think you should research your competitors and see what they're doing, right? And B, but I think the part B that is my lesson is you don't always have to do the status quo, and sometimes going against the grain has its advantages. But before you do that, and before you push your prices out to whatever, or you're changing your nightly minimum from 7 to 3 nights, make sure you're updating your pricing to reflect appropriately so you're not losing that money on the table.
100%. And I'm going to chalk this one up to a success because I think I might have convinced you to change your ways a little bit. So I'll take it.
You may.
And it could just be a hybrid approach too, whereas you say I'm going to do a 7 to 7, Saturday to Saturday up until 2 months out.
Yeah.
And after that, I pivot to a different strategy.
Yeah.
And maybe that's
I definitely have thought about that.
Well, it's like we talked about yesterday offline. If that week is still available 4 weeks in advance, you're going to have customers fighting over it. I believe it could almost be a better strategy to block out 1 week every summer until a month out and just release it for double the rate.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It would be interesting because I can't tell you how many people we see on the Facebook groups like Michigan cabin rentals or Lake Michigan getaways that are like, we're late to the game and there's nothing available. Show me what you got. And I don't mean this to come off as arrogant, but when I see what people are posting of what they have, I'm like, well, that's why you still got it sometimes, because I'm like, what I offer is of much higher quality. It's not just my hosting, it's my property and what we put into these properties. And
it's top 1% for a reason.
Yeah. So I think that's like where I'm like, yeah, to your point, you're right. It would be interesting. I don't know if I don't think you got me there yet where I'm going to hold off that weekend and wait, but we can play with it and see if it doesn't get booked, and maybe we just let it go. And if it doesn't book in the next few weeks or whatever, we can strategize. I'm open. All I'm saying is I'm open, Luke.
Yeah. I think that would be super fun. Not to keep going over it here. We need to close this one out, but I think it'd be super fun if there was a weekend that you're contemplating maybe going yourself, block it off. And then 3 weeks out, open it up at pie in the sky rates and just see what happens. 2-night min, 3-night min, whatever it is,
Yeah.
We will definitely report back with what Tyler ends up doing.
Yeah.
But
we'll see if sleeping overnight still keeps me in this excitement and trying to be a little dangerous on my end.
Yeah, you like to live dangerously, man. All right, we are at upstreamvacations.com. Check us out. We appreciate a 5-star review, and everybody take care.
Have a good one.